Dear Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, bună dimineața. First, let me start the meeting with expression of gratitude. It's an honor for me to participate in this wonderful event dedicated to the Romanian Culture Day, marked on January 15th in Romania and the Republic of Moldova. The title of my lecture is Same Roots, Feelings and Spiritual Values, which refers to the Romanian cultural unity. No matter how individualistic we strive to be, we have the same sensibility inside. For a very long time, Moldova and Romania shared the same values until the former became geopolitically distinct from historical Romania. Language is one of the most important elements in this matter. Moldova and Romania share the same language, even though it is said that the language has been separated from the homeland, from the Romania, for a long time. The fact that January 15th is the National Day of Culture in Moldova, just like in Romania, is more than symbolic, because in this way we tell ourselves that we represent the same culture. We repair some vicissitudes of history. We return to normal. Under Eminescu's star, a lot of things have developed that were aimed to combine the Romanian spirit and feeling. That's why this return is more than symbolic. It enables us to look at everything that unites us through our millennial roots. Musical art, visual art, literature, theater, ecclesiastical art, the same neams, Putna monasteries, the same teachers who have come to Bessarabia and have brought with them everything that was beyond the Prut River. There are a lot of things we could name in these scenes. Furthermore, we would call most of them in the scenes of feelings and personalities, such as George Enescu, who has been an honorary citizen of Chișinău since 1931 and who was keen to bring Romanian music and Romanian culture to Bessarabia. There is an odd alliance in the long-standing traditions that unite us. We follow the same rituals at birth, death, marriage, and so on. We share the same customs. We hold in common everything to do with the spiritual events in people's lives. The fact that composers from Moldova use the same folklore and the same folkloric musical sources relates to writers using the same language. A complete assimilation was attempted, which didn't happen, because that means the same blood, the same feeling, Romanian. Moreover, I don't think that we should prove this, because they are certain, obvious, clearly seen, even though they have been hidden, concealed, erased, forbidden for a long time. Of course, now it's a totally different reality, and the fact that we are the same culture is more and more obvious, with all the specific aspects and features, certainly, because many of the things have left their mark, even in the behavior and habits, the spiritual values, the mentality that is trained and learned as opposed to the feelings. And whether we are talking about one specific field or another, that's already the issue of mentality. Moldovan writers, musicians, and artists know that they are descendants of Romanian culture, even though there have been times when such statements were risky to utter. Their works prove this, notable by referring to their roots, themes, subjects, and other aspects. Under the sign of Romanian culture, after 1990, when it was possible to speak more freely, this generation was welcomed as at home in Romania, like Grigori Vieira, Dumitru Matkovski, Ion Hădârcă. Ion Hădârcă was the first president of the Popular Front of Moldova. And they knew how to do many things in Moldova and then welcomed in Romania as a limb of this stem. They didn't have to prove this. Their creation speaks of it, just as it happened in the field of musical culture. One of the representative Moldovan writers, Grigori Vieira, was born in Piririta village, Hotin County, at that time part of Romania, today part of Briceni district, Moldova. His parents, Pavel and Eudokia Vieira, were engaged in farming. At the end of the 80s, Grigori Vieira is in the first line of the national liberation movement in Basarabia. His texts, including the song laid on his lyrics, playing a big role in awakening of the national consciousness of Romanians in Basarabia. Vieira is one of the founders of the People's Front of Moldova and one of the organizers and leaders of the Great National Assembly of August 27, 1989. He actively participates in the debates of the 13th session of the Supreme Soviet of SSR, in which is voted the transition to Latin spelling and the Romanian language as the official language of the Republic of Moldova. Since independence from Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, there have been numerous artists who became members of learned societies of both the Republic of Moldova and Romania. In Moldova, Romanian culture is well known, and it has even found its place in school curricula. A whole group of people repatriated from Romania to Moldova after 1941, including Moldovan composer Vasile Zagorsky, who came here and brought this culture that formed us subsequently. From this point of view, it is natural to return to our roots. Literature and music. Since the 19th century, national identity has thus been defined in relation to the European model. In both processes, not without controversy and confrontation between conservatives and advocates of progress, the assimilation of Western culture and the capitalization of local traditions proved to be very beneficial. The result was the appearance in Romanian culture, in Romanian literature of the classics, Mihai Eminescu, Ioan Luca Caragiale, and others. Poetry, this inexhaustible source of inspiration, has always attracted the attention of composers, especially due to its power to influence mood and state of mind. Among all the poetry genres, it is the lyrics that stands out due to its suggestive force and strong appeal to readers' sensitivity. The essential qualities of lyrical poetry, such as flexibility when it comes to expressing feelings, emotional states, subjectivity, intimacy, and others, allow at the same time deep fusion with music, synthesizing the expressive forces of arts in a common action. Romanian contemporary music has a rich tradition of compositional approach of the famous literary pieces in different music genres. The chamber works include miniatures, lieds, and romances, and vocal cycles. Out of the wide range of creation, we can mention Gheorghe Dima, George Dumitrescu, Mihail Jora, Sigismund Toduță, and Viorel Munteanu, on lyrics by Mihai Eminescu, Lucian Blaga, Octavian Goga, Ana Blandiana, and others. Romanian composers have a lot of creations from the national poetic treasure, a lot of choral works on the lyrics of the most distinguished poets. Vasile Alexandrii, Alecu Russo, George Bacovia, Lucian Blaga, Marin Sorescu, Tudor Arghezi, Nicolae Labiș, etc. Among the authors who stood out for their extensive choral creation were composers Dan Voiculescu, Dora Cojocaru, Vasile Spătărelu, and others. In the field of symphonic music, it's including some unique examples in such genres as poetry, concert and vocal symphony with composers Nicolae Brânduș, Cornel Țăranu, Viorel Munteanu, Adrian Iorgulescu, Sorin Nerescu, on the lyrics by Mihai Eminescu, Blaga, and so on. Thus, Romanian composition demonstrates an obvious predilection from its beginnings until today for Romanian poetry, as the composers have made a decent contribution to the musical capitalization of their work. If one looks at what Moldovan composers have done on the poetry of Mihai Eminescu, Alexandrii, Bacovia, Arghezi, Blaga, and others, it can be seen that most of their works display Romanian spirituality. In the musical composition of the Republic of Moldova, Eminescu's poetic universe has fully been exploited, constituting a source of inspiration for such composers as Eugen Coca, David Gershfield, Zlata Tkac, Boris Dubosarski, Gheorghe Mustea, Tudor Chiriac, Gennady Ciobanu, Vladimir Ciolac, Eugen Doga, etc. However, this century, Romanian poetry also entered in the artistic focus of the composers from the Republic of Moldova, especially in the last decade of the second millennium. In the field of vocal symphonic music, there are some attempts to assimilate Romanian poetry into compositional creation, and the Mihai Eminescu's poetic universe has a top position. Mihai Eminescu, poet who transformed both the form and content of Romanian poetry, creating a school of poetry that strongly influenced Romanian writers and poets in the late of 19th century and early 20th century. Eminescu was educated in Germano-Romanian Cultural Center of Chernouts, now Chernovtsi, Ukraine, and at the universities of Vienna and Berlin, where he has influenced by German philosophy and Western literature. In 1874, he was appointed school inspector and librarian at the University of Iași, but soon resigned to take up the post of editor of the conservative paper Timpul. His literary activity came to the end in 1883 when he suffered the onset of a mental disorder that led to his death. Eminescu's talent was first revealed in 1870 by two poems published in Covorbiri Literare, the Junimea Society in Iași. Other poems followed, and he became recognized as the foremost modern Romanian poet. Eminescu's poetry has a distinctive simplicity of language, a masterly handling of rhyme and verse form, a profundity of thought, and a plasticity of expression which affected nearly every Romanian writer of his own period and after. His poems have been translated into several languages, including English, German, French, and others. Among his prose writings, apart from many studies and essays, the best known are the stories Cezara and Sarmanu Dionis. Nikita Stănescu, who is a symbol of literature as a poet who came to Chișinău even during the communist period and enlightened us Moldovans about Marin Preda, Marin Sorescu, and others. Stănescu, who created deep resonances in the sphere of academic musical creation, is an important source of inspiration for contemporary Romanian and Moldovan composers. His poems, which cannot be expressed only in words, and reaches the dimensions of an absolute metapoetic abstract discourse, full of contents, has become an essential tangential landmark between poetic and musical compositional art, lending itself impetuously to the incarnation into contemporary sound language. Several well-known Romanian composers leaned on Stănescu's poetry, managing to translate into musical sounds the verse of the great poet. It has got a spiritual purpose that I have approached Nikita Stănescu's poetry in my creation and my doctoral thesis, both reflecting Moldovan and Romanian musical creation. He is a poet of a remarkable amplitude, depth, and intensity, thus belonging to the very rare category of linguistic and poetic innovators, but making part, in terms of form and structure, of modernist poetry or Romanian neo-modernism. The existence in a time of interdictions of all kinds didn't represent an impediment for Nikita Stănescu. He deserts from a social reality and creates a world patronized by the angel with the book in his hand, Îngerul cu o carte în mână, transfiguring the universe through an unusual system of symbolic substitutions, supported by a lyrical language as shocking and improbable as it's romantic. Exhausting repetition, rhythmic asymmetries, allegorical images that put together make up a broad metaphor. Original symbols serve as a solid literary material for writing a contemporary piece, and the most complicated part is the transfer of the text, its symbolism and emotions in terms of musical events. I am nothing, a blood stain that speaks, wrote Nikita Stănescu in a poem entitled Self-Portrait. And for an audience unfamiliar with his work, this short poem could serve as the central metaphor from which a compelling understanding of poets' work emerges. For there are few poets as concerned with how the metaphysical emerges out of the physical experience of life and how poetry can represent what separates man from anything else. Stănescu was born in the spring of 1933 and was destined to live during some of the most extraordinary events of Romania's recent history, Second World War, and the onset of idiosyncratic and anachronic type of communism. Yet, despite the difficulties he encountered in attempting to work and publish under the all-seeing eye of the communist censorship and having to write in a climate of state-sponsored mediocrity, he never disavowed the times that he was living in. He modestly declared that no poet has her age, but the age itself has its poets, and thus undertook the burden of his talent and literary vision with alacrity, giving us the most celebrated, original, and profound Romanian poetry of the last century by simply redefining it. His genuine poetry had begun with the 11 elegies, despite the fact that he had published 2 volumes of work before 1965. Convinced that there are 2 types of artistic structures, as opposed to schools of thoughts and literary currents, he deduced that there are also 2 types of artists. Artists that see ideas and artists that see sentiments. Consequently, it can be said that in late December 1965, Stănescu started seeing ideas and presenting them as poems. In the poems of that volume, he ecstatically explored the chasm that separates animate and inanimate existence, the scope and purpose of the history of humanity, and the crowning aspects of conscience and creativity. Aware of the profundity of his philosophical insight, he finishes the book with what can be best described as a primer for the way to accommodate oneself with the historical dimension of existence and how to attain one's own individuality, for one has to strive to be seen and to lean on your own earth. During the following years, he published 13 more volumes of poetry and became celebrated as the greatest Romanian poet of his age. He died at 50 years after seeing his work translated in numerous languages, winning the Heder Prize for poetry and being nominated for the Nobel Prize. However, in order to be properly acquainted with who Stănescu was, one has to steer away from biographical aspects of his existence, because as he had observed later in life, the poet, much like the soldier, has no personal life. His biography is his work, said Stănescu. Romanian musical folklore. In the history of Romanian culture, folklore has been identified as an autonomous phenomenon, being at the same time a component of universal culture. It's a phenomenon that diversifies at the nowadays, and the task that the specialists have in carrying out the fundamental researches is to record the process, the forms through which the folklore is expressed and created today. All the phenomena that give rise to new folk structures must be studied by specialists who know exactly the value, significance, fundamental structures of this object at universal and national level. The folklore respects, beyond the local variants, some laws that are universal as the laws of musical language in general. In Moldova and Romania, we identify it in repertoire of folk ensembles of children and adults, which aim firstly at promoting, capitalizing on authentic sources, but which is situated at the limit between tradition and spectacle, a system of knowledge with practical value about the natural universe and its mythological representations, about man as a social individual and his spiritual horizon, a traditional belief system, one system of customs, rituals, and ceremonial motivated by practical demands of life, same manifestations of literary, music, dance, performance, inter-individual behaviors, as well as between two or more groups. All this proves the unique of our Romanian culture. After 1990, with the opening to the West to other Romanian areas, it offers the possibility of a comparative analysis by integrating the study of the local folk phenomenon, the current trends of researching the world's music as a complex phenomenon. Due to computerization, digital recording, and transcription techniques, it is possible to make discoveries in the field of rhythm, sound organization, etc. Unfortunately, the group field investigation of students from Academy of Music, Theatre and Fine Arts in Chișinău and other collectives were interrupted, motivated by the lack of finances. Currently, in particular, individual investigations are being carried out, and most of the materials are kept in the individual's archives of researchers. In the field of scientific research, Constantin Brailoiu, Petru Stoianov, Gleb Chaikovsky-Mireșanu continues their activity, and to this are added a new generation of ethnomusicologists, such as Vasile Kiseliță, Victor Gilaș, Svetlana Badrajan, Diana Bunea. Constantin Brailoiu, ethnomusicologist. He was born in Bucharest. He studied in Bucharest, Vienna, Lausanne, as well as Paris. In 1990, he founded the Societatea Compozitorilor Români, Society of Romanian Composers, along with other composers, and he served as General Secretary of the organization between 1926 and 1943. In 1928, he initiated the composers' collective Arhiva de Folklore, Folklore Archive, which soon became one of the largest folk music archives of its time. From 1928, he and Professor Dimitrie Gusti visited the various regions of Romania in order to make sound recordings. In 1931, he published the article Schița unei metode de folclor muzical, sketch of a method for music folklore, which became one of the foundational texts for ethnomusicology. In 1943, he became cultural consultant for the Romanian embassy in Bern, Switzerland. Due to the political incidents in his homeland, he stayed from then on in Switzerland. In 1944, he organized another archive in Geneva, l'Archive International de Musique Populaire, that was part of the Musée d'Ethnographie de Genève, Geneva Museum of Ethnography. He served as director for this association from 1944 until his death in 1958 and collected musical recordings from all over the world. In particular, between 1951 and 1958, he released 40 volumes in the series Collection Universelle de Musique Populaire Enregistrée, Universal Collection of Recorded Popular Music. In 1948, he became assistant professor at the French National Center for Scientific Research in Paris. Brailoiu was a corresponding member of the Romanian Academy from 1946. Union of Composers and Musicologists from Moldova with Cultural Romanian Institute, Mihai Eminescu, offers each year the Constantin Brailoiu's Prize for Musicologists at the National Contest of Composers and Musicologists. Visual arts. We Moldovans were introduced to albums with works of the best Romanian artists, entire schools, entire generations who brought Romanian fine art here in Moldova, who learned during the interwar period in Romania and then had disciples, even indirectly, through their art, who brought up this Romanian spirit on the left side of the Prut River. After the unification of Romanians in 1918, the few decades of peace during the interwar period were dedicated to the synchronization with European culture. In the interwar period, the most brilliant example of this is Constantin Brâncuș, innovator of the word sculpture through immersion in the primordial sources of folkloric creation. Thanks to this prominent example, we can understand how effervescent was the culture in the interwar period. The case of the Republic of Moldova, the small territory located between the Dniester and Prut rivers, demonstrates a continuous convergence of the cultural and artistic models existing not only in the small space of the old medieval historical Moldova, but also in a much wider space of the entire Carpathian, Danubian, Dniester area. In the 1990s, fine art was facing a crisis, and not in the sense of degradation, but in the sense of delaying reorientations. Works that reflected social reality were needed through innovative creative searches. For example, in the halls of the Art Expo Gallery in Bucharest, starting with the middle of February 1993, a lot of Bessarabian works were exhibited. Paintings, graphics, works of sculpture, tapestry, ceramics, etc. Among them, I included the modern expressive paintings, Dante Alighieri by Mihai Grecu, the squares of abstract lyrical expression painted by Andrei Sârbu, Eleonora Romanenco's paintings, houses in Constanța, etc. Also, in the early 90s, at the National Palace of Culture and Art was inaugurated the first Republican Jubilee exhibition of fine art, dedicated to the centenary of Mihai Eminescu's death. In the exhibition were presented works of political actuality. Thus, the bans of Romanian art critics regarding the visit to Chișinău disappeared. The tradition of the annual exhibition of Salons of Moldova, Saloanele Moldovei, once launched, a tradition initiated since the beginning of the 90s and in which visual artists from Romania and the Republic of Moldova participate. Collaboration have also been initiated in other fields of fine arts. Many Romanian sculptors have donated valuable works to the Republic of Moldova, either as monumental works erected in our country or in the form of collections of personal works donated to Chișinău. Several important works of the Romanian sculptors were unveiled in the Alley of the Classics of Romanian Literature in the center of the capital of the Republic of Moldova, Chișinău, in the Ștefan cel Mare Public Garden. It is also known about the first unofficial exhibition of our artists, Moldovan artists, in Iași, which took place in the early 90s. In fact, between 1989 and 1919, there were several artistic events marked both through the emergence of non-figurative art and through the promotion of national specificity in the art of the Republic of Moldova. In 1919, according to other sources, 1989 was opened the exhibition hall of the Union of Fine Artists of the Republic of Moldova. Subsequently, it will be called the Constantin Brâncuș Exhibition Center of the Union of Fine Artists from Moldova. And the portraits created by Iurie Canașin, Ion Țurcanu, Mircea Spinei depict, in most cases, personalities from the Romanian literary life, such as Ion Creangă, Mihai Eminescu, Vasile Alexandrii, Dmitri Cantemir, Alexei Matievici, Ion Druț, etc. On July 1991, within the art ethnography galleries in Bacău, took place the first opening of Salons of Moldova. Moldovan artists who for a certain time were deprived of the dialogue with Romanian art tried to return to the common cultural space. Then, in a contest, Mihai Grecu was awarded the grand prize of the Romanian Ministry of Culture, and Andrei Mudrea with the prize of the Chamber of Commerce in Bacău. Unfortunately, artist Andrei Mudrea passed away last week. Along the way, the artistic collaboration between the Republic of Moldova and Romania at that time became more outlined. And in the halls of the Museum of Fine Art, the exhibition of native art in Iași were inaugurated. The organization of the exhibition contests, salons of Moldova, Chișinău, Bacău, as well as the exhibitions of artists from Romania in Moldova were established as an auspicious tradition in our cultural collaboration. In 1991, during the national holiday, Our Romanian Language, limba noastră, cea română, the exhibition hall of the Union of Fine Artists hosted an ample exhibition entitled People, Events, Society, attended at artists of all generations from both sides of the Prut River. At the beginning of 2000s, in the periodic press, we get acquainted with the articles about visual artists, sculptors, and graphic artists who worked productive in the beginning of the 90s in the country and over the Prut. Mihai Grecu, Lazar Dubinovski, Valentina Rusu-Ciobanu, Eleonora Romanescu, Igor Vieira, Gheorghe Vrabe, Lica Sainchuk, and others. At that time, in Moldovan art, the tendency of evocation of the Romanian spirituality was observed. The revaluation of the Romanian language, traditional folk art and culture, the works of writers, composers, filmmakers, visual artists, the creation of theater people, and of a whole pleiad of performers, dancers, the relaunch of ancestral rites and traditions. In 1993, in the halls of the Union of Fine Artists of Romania and at the National Theatre of Bucharest, the fine art of the Republic of Moldova was opened. First time for the Bucharest public was proposed an ample exhibition of works created by Moldovan visual artists of different generations, which approach different genres and styles. Also called the exhibition at the Art Expo, it was conceived as a panorama of achievements in the field of visual arts in the last 30 years. The patrimony of the Art Museum from Chișinău was posted in Bucharest, belonging to the most representative artists of the last decades. Mihai Grecu, Valentina Rusu-Ciobanu, Ada Zevin, Maria Sacaracila, Mihai Petric, Elena Rotaru, Mihai Grati, etc. Master Mihai Grecu is an artist educated in the Romanian cultural space. By his complex and extremely gifted personality, Mihai Grecu revolutionized the visual arts in Moldova. Mihai Grecu is a fascinating and meaning-laden personality who managed to preserve the basis of Romanian art and give a sure orientation to the evolution of modern national art in our country. With a solar, colorist temperament of a rare patriotism, the artist becomes captivated by the harmony of colors, and the logic of each painting stems from the relation between warm and cold colors, between forms moving by their play of shadow and light. Mihai Grecu's work stands out by technological innovations, such as collage, fluorescent or acrylic-based dyes, various types of bronze and aluminum pigments. Technical experiments with modern dyes have permitted him to discover the possibilities of the material, the finality of the relation between form and matter. Theater. From distant times until today, the Romanian theater has built a special voice resounding on the international stage of dramaturgy. In its development, valuable names contributed to the reputation of local performances. Ion Luca Caragiale, Eugen Ionescu, Grigori Manolescu, Elvira Popescu, Radu Belegan are just a few examples of illustrious characters on the Romanian scene, discontinuing to produce renowned talents worthy of national and international recognition. A new breath in the field of the study of art, coming with independence of Moldova, was felt, first of all, by the researchers, who were no longer obliged to adjust any topic they approach to the ideology of the former odious regime and to write, first of all, of the most living of the living and about the socialist bright future. Independence created the happy openness for those who were and for those who are concerned about the true history of the theater. It gave the opportunity to write the truth, to tell things by name, not to falsify in order to agree with someone, to study forbidden documents kept in the archives of the country and abroad, but also to use the interwar press kept in the library of the Romanian Academy or at the Alexandru Ioan Cuza University of Iași, which almost totally destroyed by the Soviets. Even if in 1976 a sector of theatrical and filmology was organized within the Academy of Science of Moldova, thus making first steps in the study of the Moldovan theatre in Bessarabia until 1940, there were still a number of prohibitions according to the ideology of the time. The situation didn't change to the historical truth even with the creation of the Institute of Art History, within which no study had been published about the existence of the National Theatre in Chișinău in the interwar period. The official historians declaring this institution an instrument of anti-Soviet bourgeois nationalist Romanian propaganda. Only at the beginning of the 90s, we followed the attempts of some young researchers to get rid of the Soviet interpretations about the provenience of theatrical art in the Prut, Dniester, space, and the role of theatre in society, trying to publish new information based on Copăș's chronicles taken from the interwar press, to which we had immediate access due to the support of our colleagues in Romania. Theatricologist, correspondent member of the Academy of Science of Moldova, Leonid Cemortan, knew how to take advantage by doing an enormous work, the illustrious scholar who left behind an important monograph on the history of the Romanian theatre in Bessarabia, National Theatre in Chișinău. Much appreciated volumes about the famous actors, Maria Kosmachevskaya, Eugen Ureche, Valeriu Cupcea, and others. Interesting scientific studies, much useful to students and young researchers. Meanwhile, the other generations have come to complete theatrical science. Angelina Roșca, Svetlana Tărțău, Larisa Turea, and others. An extraordinary recent work on the history of the National Theatre, Mihai Eminescu, was made by the director of this theatre, Petru Hădârcă, a work that was, in fact, his doctoral thesis, successfully defended at the University of Sibiu. This study, also covered in an excellent monograph, represents the most complex historical vision of the Romanian theatre in Bessarabia, Moldavian Soviet Socialist Republic, and the Republic of Moldova. A theatre whose centenary anniversary was marked last autumn with the Festival of Romanian Theatres, with an international scientific conference, with premieres, with the documentary film, TV shows, etc. Since independence, we have also noticed a cardinal transfiguration of the repertoire of our theatres, which immediately distanced themselves from the dramaturgy of socialist realism, proposing to the spectator works from the history of our country, such as Oldea by Andrei Strâmbeanu or Dosarele Siberii by Petru Hădârcă, shows of great resonance not only in Moldova. The theatres in Moldova are named after great Romanian personalities: Mihai Eminescu, Eugen Ionescu, Teatru Satiricus Ion Luca Caragiale, Alexei Matievici, etc. Born in 1909 in Slatina, Eugen Ionescu was the son of a Romanian father and French and Romanian mother. His date of birth is officially 1999. He often lied and said he was born in 1912, not because he wanted to seem younger, but because his favorite Romanian dramatist, Ion Luca Caragiale, died that year and he wanted his birthday to match. After spending most of his childhood in France, Eugen Ionescu and his parents moved back to Romania in 1925. He studied at the University of Bucharest and qualified to teach French. In 1938, he took his young family back to France so he could complete his doctorate. When Second World War started in 1939, he relocated back to Romania. Although Eugen Ionescu was famous for his plays, he also wrote poetry and criticism. He didn't write his first play until he was almost 40. It was called The Bold Soprano, Cântăreața Cheală, a play about a dinner party between two English couples, the Smiths and the Martins, and their nonsensical conversation. Near the end, the stage goes black, and when the lights come on, the play starts over from the beginning, with the Smiths reciting the Martins lines and the Martins reciting the Smiths. This play holds the world's record for being played in the same theater for the longest time. The idea for the Bold Soprano came because Eugen Ionescu chose this time to learn English. The method he chose to learn English made him pay close attention to the minutiae of language and how it could be used. He suddenly saw the comedy in the truth of sentences. He also wrote one novel, The Hermit, published in 1975. It is a very short work about a sales clerk who inherits money and spends the rest of his days contemplating the human condition. In March of 1994, at the age of 84, Eugen Ionescu passed away. He is buried in the Montparnasse cemetery in Paris. On his tomb, in French, is wrote, "Pray to the I don't know who, Jesus Christ, I hope." During his lifetime, Eugen Ionescu received many prestigious awards, including the Austrian State Prize for European Literature. Cinematography. In the last 10 years, the seventh art, cinematography, has been subjected to several attempts at resuscitation in the Republic of Moldova. In 2017, the government approved a regulation on the financing at cinema through which filmmakers receive money from the state budget for independent film projects. At the same time, the first film platform in the country was launched. In all these years, cinema festivals, workshops were organized, and the most important that the films are appreciated both in the country and abroad. The film Wedding in Basarabia was officially released in 2010 in Moldova and Romania. In 2009, however, it was presented at several international festivals, where it was received quite well by critics and the public. This includes the Montreal World Film Festival, the Timișoara Festival in Timișoara, and the Kinoshock Indie Film Festival in Russia. At Tallinn Black Night Film Festival in December 2009, it was awarded the special jury prize. The film is co-production of Romania and Moldova. Another movie, Innocent Crime, is also co-production Romania with Moldova. In the same period, were released documentaries, short films, and animations made by filmmakers from Republic of Moldova. The International Documentary Film Festival Moldox, the Documentary Film Festival Chronograph, the International Film Festival Ravac are platforms that promote, including the local film productions. The Moldovan Film Days is an event that familiarizes the general public with the films made in Moldova. The most representative film director of the Moldovan cinematography is Emil Luteanu, who charmed audience with his passionately romantic films, moved them with thoughtful dramas, and educated them with insightful documentaries. Moldovan director was born on 6th November 1936 to a family of teachers. His father was a teacher of physics and his mother philology. After the formation of the Moldavian Soviet Socialist Republic, the family immigrated to Bucharest, where their name changes from Lototsky to Loteanu. He spent his adolescence in Bucharest, where he graduated from high school, and at the age of 13 years, he published his first poems in the newspaper Contemporary. It was in Bucharest where his love for the cinema first started. In the late 80s, Emil Loteanu returns to Moldova film, where he works on Moldovan television and films with the famous poem Luceafărul by Mihai Eminescu. In 1987, Emil Loteanu becomes president of the Union of Cinematographers of Moldova and manages up to 1992. Artistic culture in the Republic of Moldova. The Republic of Moldova has laws regulating culture, government programs, and strategies. The adaptation of these laws was made by pro-European governments within the 30 years of independence. Today, we can move forward in the process of improvement of the cultural system. The development and support of the arts have been established as one of the priorities in national programs and strategies. Artistic culture in the Republic of Moldova is rich and diverse. We have genres of traditional art that are millennia old. The Republic of Moldova has a certain cultural artistic infrastructure. In this period of 30 years, we have become a part of world cultural processes. Our writers are members of the Pen Club. We, the creators of music, are members of the International Society of Contemporary Music. The representatives of fine art and visual heritage are members of ICOM and ICOMOS. In Moldova, we organize valuable international festivals with the participation of representatives from most countries of the world. For example, the International Festival of Contemporary Music, the New Music Days, which has been attended by more than 500 artists from 40 countries in the 30 editions held so far. In addition to the great peaks of Romanian culture to which we belong, such as Mihai Eminescu, translated into many languages and considered one of the most important post-Romantic poets, George Enescu, the great Romanian Moldovan composer, we assume all the richness of Romanian artistic culture, enriching it through the creation of artists from the Republic of Moldova. I would mention the works of our writers, as Ion Druță, whose plays have been staged in major theaters in France, Israel, Russia, Romania, and the Baltic republics. Other examples include the novels, short stories, and poems of Vasile Vasilache, Aurel Busuioc, Leo Botnaru, and others, which have been translated and published in other European countries. There is the composer Gennady Ciobanu, who has performed in concert, contemporary music festivals, and world music days in many countries around the world, and is often broadcast on European radio stations. He is member of the Union of Composers and Musicologists from Moldova since 1987, and of the Union of Composers and Musicologists from Romania since 1995, as well as of the Union of Journalists of the Republic of Moldova. From 1990, he is the president of the Union of Composers and Musicologists of Moldova, and since 1993 of the Moldavian Association for Contemporary Music. He was the Minister of Culture of the Republic of Moldova and the member of the Parliament of the Republic of Moldova. There is Eugen Doga, whose standing is international thanks to his film music and popular music. He is well known in Romania thanks to the music for movie Maria Mirabella and other pieces. Many artists such as Mihai Grecu, Valentina Rusu Ciobanu are only now posthumously gaining international recognition. A whole cohort of visual artists from the 1900s and 2000s and more recent generation are already appreciated at the highest level in prestigious international exhibitions and openings. For example, the Minister of Culture, film director Sergiu Prodan is the winner of the Golden Palm Venice Film Festival Award. Our young artists take top places on the pedestal of the most important international competitions. Unfortunately, we also have problems, the most important of which is the impossibility to get the appropriate level of material and financial support of culture. In consequence, there is a considerable influx of artists from our country who enrich the cultural weight of other European countries. In conclusion, I am glad that now, in this great synchronization and harmony, interrupted more rarely by the bitter times when anti-Romanian forces dictate the Republic of Moldova, in the best periods of synchronization, important things happen to bring about the institutional recovery. I would like to thank the Romanian government for giving us the opportunity for students to study at Romanian educational institutions. It's a very important thing of recognition and return to the roots. Here I'm referring not only to those in the field of art education, although this is very important as they work with the great masters, some of whom are direct heirs to the source. They know, for example, George Enescu or his disciples, but also in the other fields. They are the ones who receive this spiritual knowledge directly from the source. This conclusion reminds me in the Maltese scholar and founding member of the International Academy, Mihai Eminescu of Craiova, Romania, Olivier Frigieri, who called for unity through diversity. Romania and the Republic of Moldova are two nations, but one culture. Frigieri was a Maltese poet, novelist, literary critic, and philosopher. He led the establishment of literary history and criticism in Maltese while teaching at the University of Malta, studying the works of Duncar, Ruzar Brifa, and others. A prolific writer himself, Frigieri explored new genres to advocate the Maltese language, writing the libretti for the first oratorio and the first cantata in Maltese language. His work aimed to promote the Maltese cultural identity. Acknowledging and returning to one's roots is a way to comprehend one's identity. The cultural themes addressed in Romania are also discussed in Moldova, presumably at a different level. The problems that concern our culture are the same. That's why it is natural not only to celebrate the Culture Day on the same day, for the same reason, in honor to the same personality, but to be able every day to work together. We are people of the same spirit, cultural space, and feelings. Thank you.